Mysterious disappearance. 1924. Everest, still unconquered, a mountain that calls, but for most, remains unfathomable. Climbers from the UK and other countries decide to mount an expedition to break this record and reach the summit. Among the team is the experienced mountaineer George Mallory and the young Andrew Irvine. Mallory was already a seasoned traveler. He had attempted the summit multiple times before and was confident that he and Irvine could make it. 1924 was their last chance. They were preparing for the final stage of their ascent. June 8, 1924, Mallory and Irvine begin their ascent from base camp, with the rest of the expedition following behind. The journey is grueling, the altitude is felt with every step, and with each passing meter, the air grows thinner. But they press on, despite the physical and mental challenges. As they move through glaciers and crevasses, they climb higher and higher. At around 8,600 meters, about 250 meters below the summit, something happens that will later become one of the greatest mysteries in mountaineering history. Mallory and Irvine vanish. When the team returned to base camp, no one had seen Mallory and Irvine. They hadn't come back as planned. A rescue operation began immediately, but the weather and the tough terrain made the search incredibly difficult. The expedition spent several days trying to find the climbers, but their trail disappeared in the icy expanse of Everest. They were gone without a trace. As the years went by, more and more theories emerged about what might have happened to Mallory and Irvine. In 1933, 9 years later, the search was officially called off and their fate remained a mystery. One theory suggests that they may have reached the summit but perished on the way down. It's possible that a fatal mistake was made in conditions where any misstep leads to tragedy. However, nearly 75 years passed since their disappearance, and it wasn't until 1999 that researchers discovered George Mallory's body at an altitude of about 8,155 meters. This didn't solve the mystery, as the remains could have been influenced by other expeditions, but many began to believe that he might have been close to the summit. This discovery sparked new questions. Adventure consultant's disaster. May 10th, 1996, Rob Hall and Scott Fisher's teams head out from Camp 4, 7,950 meters, around midnight. One last stretch to the summit. It's already freezing, winds picking up, but visibility's solid. Climbers push through pitch-black darkness, lighting the way with their headlamps. The only sounds, crampons crunching on ice and heavy breaths through oxygen masks. The climb's brutal. First major obstacle, the balcony, 8,400 meters, a narrow, snow-covered ledge. Some climbers take a quick break here to swap out their oxygen tanks. Beck Weathers is already feeling the first signs of exhaustion, but he keeps moving. Next stop, the south summit, 8,750 meters. The altitude's hitting hard, every step's a struggle. Still, around 2 p.m., Rob Hall makes it to the top with a few climbers. Scott Fisher's still on his way, but he's slowing down. Euphoria takes over at the summit. Climbers snap photos, take in the view, but there's no time to waste. The descent needs to start ASAP. Rob Hall notices one of his clients, Doug Hansen, falling way behind. He decides to wait for him, a critical moment that eventually leads to disaster. Meanwhile, Scott Fisher keeps pushing upward, but he's not doing well. His strength is fading, but he refuses to stop. After 3 p.m., the weather starts to turn. Snowfall gets heavier, visibility drops. Descending in these conditions is insanely dangerous. Rob Hall and Doug Hansen are still near the summit. Oxygen's running out, their strength is fading. Scott Fisher is completely drained, barely able to move. Some climbers lose their way, wandering through the whiteout. By 5 p.m., a full-on storm hits. Winds hit 90 kilometers per hour, temps plunge to minus 40 degrees Celsius. Those who stayed too long are now trapped in a deadly nightmare. Rob Hall radios base camp, but there's no way to help him. He speaks to his wife one last time before the connection cuts out. Scott Fisher is stuck on the slope, too weak to go any further. Yasuko Namba and Beck Weathers stop moving. They're presumed dead. In the morning, Beck Weathers, already declared dead, suddenly regains consciousness. He can't see, his hands are frozen solid, but sheer survival instinct pushes him to crawl downward. Somehow, he makes it to camp, where he's later airlifted to safety. That day, 8 people lost their lives. Mistakes, delays, and a sudden storm turned the climb into a death trap. This tragedy changed the way people see commercial climbing, but even now, adventurers keep chasing the summit fully aware of the risks. Earthquake on Everest. April 25th, 2015, morning. In Everest Base Camp, climbers gather, gearing up for their ascent. The mountains and glaciers seem calm. Over 1,000 people are in the camp. Climbers, Sherpas, journalists. They're all waiting for the right conditions to start their push to the summit. At this point, no one knows that in just a few hours, their plans will be shattered by a natural disaster. 11:56 a.m. A 7.8 magnitude earthquake shakes the ground. The epicenter is 75 kilometers from Kathmandu, but the disaster is felt everywhere, even at Everest's height. Chaos erupts in base camp. Tents collapse, gear flies everywhere, and people are confused, not knowing what's happening. The ground sways beneath their feet, and in that moment, it's clear. The mountain doesn't forgive carelessness. Climbers and Sherpas try to hold on, but the force of the tremors is so strong, it feels like the very foundation of the earth is shifting beneath them. The earthquake triggers catastrophic consequences. A massive avalanche, a huge mass of snow, tumbles down from the heights and engulfs base camp. The avalanche, mixed with rocks and ice, tears through the camp, sweeping up everything in its path. Sherpas, climbers, support staff, all fall victim to the disaster. This is the moment when people are trapped. Gear, tents, supplies, everything that had been prepared for the ascent is now consumed by the snowstorm. Those who weren't fast enough won't survive. The rescue operation begins as soon as the avalanche subsides. Those who survived start searching for each other amid the wreckage. Some climbers are buried under the snow. Their bodies can be swallowed up in seconds. Rescue teams and surviving climbers start digging through the debris, but the heavy snowfall and destruction make the operation even more difficult. Helicopters, which normally can't operate in such conditions, do their best to evacuate people. Many remain trapped in the camps waiting for rescue. The disaster claimed the lives of 22 people, many of whom didn't survive the avalanche impact or were buried under snow. Over 60 people were injured, most of whom were later evacuated. Many climbers and Sherpas found themselves in extremely difficult conditions, and the rescue effort took several days. Khumbu Icefall Disaster, April 2014. This marks the start of the main climbing season on Everest. In the Khumbu Icefall, a key section of the route at around 5,500 meters, climbers navigate through numerous ice crevasses and ice falls where every step requires extreme focus. Here, climbers and Sherpas set ropes, prepare ascent routes, and this spot is one of the most dangerous on Everest. But on April 18, 2014, when the expedition teams and Sherpas began their work, disaster struck. At 6 a.m., when most climbers were still preparing for their ascent, a massive avalanche struck. It wasn't just a snow mass, but a deadly mix of snow and ice that swept everything in its path. The avalanche raced through the Khumbu Icefall, taking out anything in its way. At the moment of impact, 16 Sherpas were working on setting up the route. The avalanche engulfed them, and 13 Sherpas were killed instantly. These were experienced professionals who risked their lives every day to help climbers reach the summit. The scene was horrific. Those who survived barely managed to dig themselves out from under the snow, but many were seriously injured. Once the avalanche subsided, the rescue operation began. Rescuers, climbers, and other Sherpas, despite their own shock, immediately started searching for survivors. Sherpas, despite their own loss, kept working, helping those trapped under the rubble. In the extreme cold and amidst the destruction, finding people was incredibly difficult. The avalanche didn't just injure those at its center, but also created massive challenges for the rescuers. Yet, despite all of this, the search and rescue operation was carried out with immense risk to their own lives. Climbers and rescuers risked everything to pull survivors out, knowing the danger of further collapses. As a result of the tragedy, 13 Sherpas lost their lives and several others sustained serious injuries. This disaster hit the climbing community hard. Many of the deceased were experienced Sherpas who had dedicated their lives to guiding climbers. Their loss was irreplaceable, and for the families of those who died, it was a tragedy that left a lifelong scar. After the disaster, expeditions on Everest were paused for several days, and this incident sparked heated discussions about the safety of mountaineering and the role of Sherpas.